I don't know why I agreed to go. Maybe it was the way the bright carnival lights shone in the distance, or maybe it was the faint sound of carousel music drifting through the night air. Whatever it was, something about the abandoned carnival on the edge of town pulled me in. It had been shut down for years. People said there was an accident, a fire, or maybe something worse. No one really knew. The rides were rusted now, and the bright colors had faded to muted, peeling shades of decay. The gates were chained shut, but everyone in town knew there was a hole in the fence on the west side. "Don't stay too long," my friend Jess had warned. "Weird things happen there after dark." I laughed her off at the time, but now, standing at the edge of the carnival grounds, I wasn't so sure. The place was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you feel like you're being watched. The first thing I noticed as I stepped through the hole in the fence was the Ferris wheel. It towered over the carnival, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the cloudy sky. The wind blew softly, and the wheel creaked, swaying slightly as if it might come to life at any moment. I told myself I'd just take a quick look around, snap a few pictures, and leave. But as I wandered deeper into the carnival, the air seemed to grow heavier. The smell of burnt sugar lingered, faint but unmistakable, as if someone had just been making cotton candy. Then there was the music. At first, it was so faint I thought I was imagining it. The tinny, off-key notes of a carousel organ drifted through the air, growing louder with every step I took. My flashlight's beam swept over rusted food stands and shattered glass, but there was no one there. No one alive, anyway. I followed the sound, my heart pounding. It led me to the carousel. The ride looked as if it hadn't moved in decades. The painted horses were cracked and peeling, their once bright eyes dull and lifeless. Yet the music was coming from here. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing in the emptiness. The music stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the carousel began to move. Slowly at first, the horses lurching forward with a groan of old machinery. The lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. I froze, unable to believe what I was seeing. There was no power here, no way the ride should be working. And yet, it spun, faster and faster, the horses seeming to come to life as their heads turned to follow me. "Leave," a voice whispered behind me. I spun around, my flashlight trembling. There was no one there. "Leave," the voice said again, louder this time. It was high-pitched and broken, like a child's voice filtered through static. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, the flashlight's beam bouncing wildly as I sprinted back toward the fence. The music grew louder, deafening, and I could hear footsteps behind me, light and quick, like someone running to catch me. When I reached the hole in the fence, I didn't look back. I scrambled through, and didn't stop running until I was back on the main road. Only then did I dare to glance over my shoulder. The carnival was dark again, silent and still. The Ferris wheel loomed motionless against the sky, and the carousel was as dead as I'd first found it. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that my mind had played tricks on me in the dark. But when I got home, I found something in my pocket, a small, cracked ticket stub with the words, "Admit 1" printed in faded ink. I hadn't taken anything from the carnival. At least, I don't think I had. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint strains of carousel music outside my window, and I wonder if the carnival let me leave, or if it's just waiting for me to come back. It started as a dare. My friends had been talking about the old highway that ran just outside of town, a stretch of cracked asphalt known as Whispering Road. Rumor had it that strange things happened there at night. People reported hearing voices, seeing shadowy figures, even losing hours of time. No one knew where the road led. It just vanished into the hills, surrounded by overgrown trees that seemed to swallow the light. "Go ahead, take a walk down it," my friend Derek said, smirking as he handed me a flashlight. "Prove it's just a dumb story." I didn't want to back down, so I agreed. That's how I found myself standing alone at the entrance of Whispering Road at midnight. The air was colder than I expected, and the wind carried a faint, almost musical sound. I told myself it was just the breeze rustling through the trees, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach said otherwise. I clicked on the flashlight and stepped forward. The road stretched endlessly ahead, disappearing into the dark. The cracks in the pavement were filled with weeds, and the air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic. At first, nothing happened. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, and my footsteps echoed faintly on the empty road. I kept glancing back, half expecting Derek and the others to jump out and scare me. But the road behind me remained empty, stretching back to where I'd started. I don't know when I first heard the whispering. It was faint, barely audible, like the rustle of leaves or the soft murmur of a distant conversation. I stopped walking and listened. The sound grew louder, but I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't coming from the trees or the wind. It was coming from the road itself. "Hello!" I called out, my voice trembling. The whispering stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then a soft voice replied, "Keep going." It was a woman's voice, soft and melodic, but it sent a chill down my spine. I swung the flashlight around, searching for the source, but there was no one there. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. Just silence. I considered turning back, but something compelled me to keep going. The air grew colder with every step, and the whispering returned, louder this time. It wasn't just one voice anymore, it was many. Dozens of voices, overlapping, whispering my name. I walked faster, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The road seemed different now. The cracks in the pavement looked deeper, almost like jagged mouths opening beneath my feet. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, their branches forming twisted arches above me. And then I saw it. A figure stood in the middle of the road, about 50 feet ahead. It was tall and thin, with long, spindly limbs that didn't seem quite human. Its head was tilted to one side, and it seemed to shimmer, as if it weren't entirely solid. "Turn back," the voices whispered. "Turn back now." I froze, unable to move. The figure took a step toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. The voices grew louder, screaming now. I turned and ran. The road felt endless, stretching on forever. My flashlight flickered, and I could hear the figure behind me, its footsteps uneven and heavy. The whispering voices didn't stop. They were in my ears, my head, calling my name over and over. When I finally saw the entrance to the road, I sprinted toward it, my legs burning with effort. I didn't stop running until I was back at Derek's house, pounding on the door. When he opened it, he looked at me like I was crazy. "What the hell happened to you?" I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was sit there, shaking, as he and the others stared at me. Later that night, when I was finally alone in my room, I noticed something. My shoes were caked in mud, but the road had been dry. And on my arm, there was a faint mark like a handprint burned into my skin. I never went near Whispering Road again. But sometimes late at night, I still hear the whispering. And it's getting louder. It started as an innocent idea, a way to clear my head after a long week. A nighttime walk through the woods sounded peaceful, even therapeutic. I wasn't afraid of the dark, and I had done hikes like this countless times before. The air was crisp, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting a faint glow on the winding trail. I grabbed my flashlight, put on my jacket, and headed out. The woods were only a 5-minute walk from my house. A dense, sprawling forest that stretched for miles. During the day, it was a haven for families and hikers. At night, it transformed into something entirely different. The trees, so inviting in daylight, became towering shadows that seemed to lean closer the further I walked in. The first 10 minutes were uneventful. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. I let my flashlight guide me, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. It felt good to be out there alone, away from the noise of the world. But then I heard it, a faint snapping sound like a twig breaking underfoot. I stopped, holding my breath. The sound came again, closer this time. I swung my flashlight around, scanning the trees. Nothing, just shadows and silence. Probably an animal, I muttered to myself, though the words felt hollow. I kept walking, trying to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the silence became. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And then I saw it, a figure standing just off the trail, barely illuminated by the moonlight. At first, I thought it was a tree or some trick of the light, but as I moved my flashlight toward it, I realized it was a person. "Hello!" I called out, my voice sounding far more confident than I felt. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It just stood there motionless, watching. Or at least, I thought it was watching. I couldn't see its face. Its entire body was cloaked in shadow. Something about it felt wrong. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to leave, but curiosity won out. I took a step toward it, shining my flashlight directly at the figure. The light should have revealed its features, but it didn't. It was as if the shadow absorbed the light, refusing to give away any details. I blinked, and it was gone. Panic started to set in. I spun around, my flashlight darting from tree to tree. Nothing. Just the endless forest. My breathing quickened, and I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe the darkness was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just tired. But then the sound came again. Footsteps. This time they were deliberate, heavy, and unmistakable. They weren't behind me or to the side. They were above me. I froze and tilted my head up, my flashlight trembling in my hand. There, perched on one of the branches, was the figure. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its head tilted at an impossible angle as it stared down at me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt them boring into me. I ran. I don't remember much of the sprint back to the trailhead. My heart pounded in my chest, and my lungs burned with every breath. The forest seemed alive, the trees reaching out to grab me, the shadows closing in. The footsteps followed me the entire way, never far behind. When I finally broke free of the woods, I didn't stop running until I was back inside my house, locking the door behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for air, my flashlight still clutched in my hand. I wanted to believe it was over, that I was safe. But then I noticed something on the floor, a small pile of leaves, damp with dew. My shoes were clean, I hadn't brought them in. And when I turned around, I saw it. The figure was standing in the corner of my living room, its head tilted, watching me. The flashlight flickered, and the room went dark.